And the thing is, though, is once you slab something, I think you win. I felt
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
I won every time I've slabbed something. So
What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. Today we've got another guest interview. They don't call this guy the Wrestling Card King for nothing. Rob England joins me as we discuss all kinds of interesting topics within the world of wrestling cards. We talk about how Rob got into collecting, how he got into wrestling cards, what the market looks like now, what it could look like in the future, and just more fun tidbits of information to hopefully help you, the collector. Before we get into that, just a few quick show notes. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Give me one of these if I'm bringing you value. Make sure to check out the podcast I'm involved with, Wrestling with Cards, the podcast, which is actually an audio companion to some of these videos that I put out. Also, check out Worlds Collide, where I get together with Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com. We talk about all different kinds of things in the wrestling card world from two different perspectives. Also, if you really like the content that I'm putting out and you want to help support the show, check out Wrestling with Cards on Patreon, where you can help contribute to keeping the show going, maybe direct the way that the content goes, get some exclusive bonus content for patrons only. All the links to everything I've talked about are in the show notes, so make sure to check that out. Now let's get into the interview with Wrestling Card King, Rob England. Rob England, Wrestling Card King, welcome.
thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
So for anybody new to wrestling cards, that they might know David Peck, but they don't know you, and you may have the bigger collection than David at this point. Just give a brief introduction of yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Rob England, and I'm Wrestling Card King, and I've been collecting wrestling cards on eBay since 1999. So my sign-in date was January 22nd, 1999. And that's when you would have your email address be your eBay user ID. And I've been at it pretty much daily for a couple decades now, which is pretty crazy to think about.
You've got the login date down. That means you are diehard and you know what you're doing. So what got you started collecting in the first place, just going all the way back?
So I collected cards as a kid. I remember buying 1983 baseball packs. And really my love of baseball came from the 1982 World Series. I come from a really rural part of California up near the Oregon border. And my hometown had 1,000 people in it. And we had two Major League Baseball players. And one was Dane Orge. And he played for the St. Louis Cardinals. And he was in the World Series. And just to see a local kid, on that stage at that time was just amazing. And just my love of sports really generated from there. And, I enjoy football, basketball, and I come from a wrestling family as far as amateur wrestling.
Right.
Bunch of cousins that were good wrestlers here locally. And I was a part of that team eventually. And we're a real successful local high school team where we won 13 league titles in a row. And yeah, I would say it just all started there. I've just always been involved in sports.
So before we jump into the wrestling, do you currently collect any non-wrestling stuff?
I really don't. And I do that just because, I don't know, I just want to be the best, right? And I really can't compete with, the deep pockets of those basketball collectors, baseball collectors, football. And so when I went, into collecting in 99 and eBay, especially into wrestling, I just said, you know what, this is something kind of unique. And at the time, I was thinking that I could collect them all and It wouldn't be that hard. And then, with the internet, it just brought so much information as far as, even if I was to collect all the, let's say, amateur wrestling cards, that really wasn't even possible either when I realized that there was things from Germany and Italy and Sweden and all of that. So
I'm guessing too, if you're ignoring other things outside of wrestling, it's kind of helping you like laser focus and on more obscure things within the lane that you're in, as opposed to being like me. Sometimes I get too, like, I'm over here and I'm over here, I'm doing this, this, and this. So I'm sure that's helped you build a better collection. So once you decided you wanted to go into wrestling cards, like what what I guess went through your mind when you were like, okay, I am all in on wrestling?
I went in all in initially. And again, and some of that was just ignorance and not knowing that it was going to be as big as what it would, turn out to be. But back then, if you figure 1999, it was a really, really different time as far as information and how you would access it.
Right.
That was really at the early stages of the internet. So, you know, for someone like myself, I got an education real quickly.
So I want to talk about just real quick your amateur wrestling cards. That's something that even people within wrestling card space, they don't understand or don't know they exist. So how did you find out about those, and when did you start buying them? How did you start going down that rabbit hole?
So actually in 1983, my mom had bought me a box of cereal, and in that box of cereal was the greatest Olympians trading cards, and you would get one per box. And I just so happened in the box of cereal that my mom got me was Dan Gable.
Awesome.
And Dan Gable is, just, a phenomenal ambassador for amateur wrestling. And I got that. And I was really hooked, and I didn't really even know anything else other than that card. And that was something in my personal collection for a long time. I actually ended up trading it to one of my buddies just to complete a deal because we were at a stalemate. And I gave it up thinking that I could just get it back later. And he was real stubborn about it. He didn't trade it back to me. And, he ended up going to the military and all that. And that's actually what got me to eBay, is that I needed to go back and get that card.
That's an
And
interesting story that, a hard trade all of a sudden leads to eBay, and then look where you are now. Crazy.
yeah, so it was pretty phenomenal. And he actually gave it back to me at one point, but he held on to it for a good decade and just to torment me, I think. But
So I'm sure everybody, I know a little bit, but even I'm not an expert. And I know a lot of people out there, like I said, didn't even know they existed. What's the market like for these? And where do you see kind of the future going for the amateur and Olympic wrestling cards?
yeah, so some of the hardcore collectors, I think they got most of what they needed. So as far as the relationships that I built on eBay, but I have noticed that there are starting to have some new collectors into amateur wrestling as well. And of course, I would say one of the good things is when you get those crossover stars and the
Yeah.
early, Kurt Angles and the Brock Lesnar's, and now with just everyone getting into pro wrestling cards and just the market that could create.
Do you think there's also a potential crossover with MMA being so popular now?
Oh, there's definitely some crossover. If you look at a lot of the UFC champions, a lot of them have amateur wrestling backgrounds. And I recently, in the last year, found out that there was an Olympic wrestling set from 2004 that was released by, I believe it was like USA Wrestling or The Mat. And one of the cards in there is a Daniel Cormier.
Awesome.
So you would have a Daniel Cormier 2004 rookie card, which is
Awesome.
really amazing as far as his impact on the world of mixed martial arts.
Right. So this is a little bit of this question could go on forever. You've got quite the collection built up, but it's also seems to be a lot of it high end. So talk about just kind of your relationship as in your head as you walk through balancing collector, investor, when to buy, when to sell, and just kind of the thing you and David both had eyes on certain things, no matter whether it was popular or not. All of a sudden now you guys own some of the biggest wrestling cards in the hobby. So I know that's a little long-winded, a lot to unpack there, but just break that down for us if you can.
Yeah, I would say that my interest in collecting was just collecting, to be honest. And sometimes, to pull, and I'll go back to amateur wrestling cards, just to get one amateur wrestling card, you might have to buy a whole lot of cards that may include gymnasts or, some Olympic boxers and all that. And so I somewhat got directed into just selling just by getting stuff that I wasn't interested in at all. But all of it was about my personal collection. for most of it. And I don't even know where the turning point was for me, is where I could see that, I could pick up some good deals, flip some cards, and help fuel my collection. And I really do consider myself to be a collector at heart still. And even though, people may see Wrestling Card King, floating out some cards on eBay here and there.
So what, I guess, made you decide to start picking up the multiple copies? Now that's a commonplace now in, well, even wrestling cards, but also like modern sports. We see a Luca or Zion and somebody's got like 30 of them or more in, the highest grade PSA slabs they can get. Were you one of those collectors that just wanted as many as of a certain guy as possible? Or did you see a future in any specific card?
No, I was never really good at that, to be honest, as far as getting multiple of a copy and just keeping it. And for example, at one time I had 30 something Andre the Giant 1974 Yamakatsu cards. And most of them were, PSA 6, right around that range. And I was thinking, oh, this is going to be my hoard and this is going to be, a future investment. But to be honest, there wasn't a whole lot of interest in those in that grade. Of course, today is completely different.
Right.
And so when I was, trading other collectors, I eventually brought those out and utilized those as part of my trades to get some other stuff, new stuff for my collection. I would say really, as far as getting multiple PSA graded cards, that's been pretty recent for me, I would say. I have, of course, multiple raws all over in my collection, and that's never been a problem. But as far as high-end PSA grades, me holding multiple copies, that's something that I've had to work on as a collector. So, and not getting bored with, 10 of the same card.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask. Is this something you've started actually collecting? Like once you got into owning 10 of the same card, you're like, wow, this is kind of cool. Or are you kind of like keeping a cycle of those going in and out as far as buying and selling?
A little bit of both, and I look at all the opportunities that I could have had to, have a 1982 Wrestling All-Stars Hulk Hogan. And, of course, at one point, if you got rid of one of those, it would bring, good money and it could pay for things. But now I just look at it and see that this is such an iconic card. If I happen to get this in my collection, I'm just going to keep it from this point forward. And probably a lot of the multiple copies will be the iconic rookie cards, but not necessarily, middle of their career type cards.
And speaking of that, is there any like new product that you are kind of looking at? Not like trying to be sneaky on plays or anything, but just stuff you generally like that you're buying to add to your collection.
So people probably know, if they follow me on Twitter, that I jumped into the 1997 Panini stickers.
Yep.
And I ended up buying a few cases of those and, got my Rocky Maivias graded, and I have more in the pipeline. But I just thought they were super cool that an issue from 24 years ago wasn't known by myself, which I consider to be a, pretty big deal, or David Peck and Anthony Havlovic with Husker Halves didn't know their existence, and there was this warehouse find. And so I really like the story behind that. And as far as the brand of Panini, the copyright on the back, yeah, the card number on the back. So I thought it was a really neat chance. And I you can't go wrong with The Rock and having that in your collection moving forward. He's just such Americana. And then to have things like the first appearance really of Stone Cold and the WWF and Triple H. So
that's where I was going to go next. Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, so I just feel like there's a really good opportunity there. And just with the, they're not necessarily, they call them stickers, which I know that the whole point is to put them into an album, but they don't peel. So you're to add an adhesive to it to put it into the album.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never actually tried to do that, so that's news to me.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. And then too, I think that, The Rock could kind of in my opinion, follow the success of the Mike Tyson a decade
Yeah.
earlier. And to me, it's like, why not? If this Tyson sticker is going berserk, and of course, population reports matter,
Right.
but they're both cultural icons, for their respective eras. And if the Mike Tyson sticker can do it, Dwayne Johnson can too.
So you brought something to my attention just now, talking about kind of obscure releases. No, you and David, you guys are like diehard PSA. Have you had problems with them grading certain things? Like, what's your experience that with them as far as like obscure stuff that may help others if they find something in their collection?
Yeah, I've had to work with PSA on some of the issues. For example, I did an express order for the Rocky Maivia 1997 stickers, and I received the email from them that said no spec info. And that brought me into a little bit of hysteria because I was afraid
Yeah.
that they're going to ship them back to me and I was going to lose all that process of them logging the order because I didn't include anything else. And I was able to put a hold on it. And I had previously emailed them the entire album as backup, as proof of a complete checklist. And once they were able to look at the complete album, then I was able to proceed in getting these graded. So I was really happy that I was able to do that because I know now collectors are going to be sending in those same stickers moving forward. And I've had a history of doing that for multiple issues. The 1981 Poppy
Yeah.
with the Hulk Hogan, I was able to provide enough information for PSA to grade those and, numerous other issues throughout the years too.
So is PSA pretty easy to work with on that stuff, or are they kind of like our way or the highway? Since I've sent in subs, but it's always been stuff that's they have cataloged, or maybe you or David or somebody else kind of did the groundwork for me to send those in. So how are they to deal with on that kind of stuff?
It could be a little both, to be honest. You need some reputable sources as far as background information. And I totally get it that you want to be sure before you start slabbing things as, licensed product and knowing a complete checklist and not being, taken by surprise. So, it just takes a little bit of work. But, if you could get a complete checklist, get a year and a manufacturer, you could eventually get it done. And sometimes I have the energy for it and sometimes I don't.
Do you think it's a pretty good assumption that we'll use wrestlingtradingcards.com as a reference? Their checklist, would you say, hey, if this person's got a card, if it exists on that checklist, you're pretty much good to go to send it in?
That's one of the best sites to have as far as to work with PSA.
Okay.
So I would say that if it's on their site, I would think it's about 99% chance that you'll be able to get your card through.
That's what I've been referencing because I've got some obscure stuff, promo cards or whatever, and if I don't see it on there, I generally don't send it in. So that's what.
And back in the day, actually, I would talk to them and provide them some of the backup and have them put it up on their site and then be able to work with PSA as far as referencing, WTC and kind of working with both of them
right.
to make sure I get my stuff through. So
that's what we got to do, especially in the wrestling community. We all got to work together to get these things done. You mentioned way earlier, I'm kind of bouncing around here, trading. That's something that I don't get to do a lot nowadays. Do you get to trade with many people now, or is it mostly just sales?
I love to trade personally, and it just reminds me of being a kid and
exactly
and how I grew up. And there's a certain nostalgia of trading, and it also allows me, for example, if I'm a couple cases deep in this Panini product, and if I'm able to add some other pieces to my collection, then by releasing some of that, then that's a great way to do it. And as I was saying earlier, I don't do well having multiples or several of one issue. And so, I'm a little freer in that regard of letting that kind of stuff go.
We've seen and speaking of this 97 Panini stuff, we've seen a crazy run on just the hobby in general. But wrestling cards over the past, I would say 6 months, we've seen kind of a gradual increase over the last few years, slow and steady. But then all of a sudden, we're seeing these 85 Hogans sell for like monstrous amounts of money. And you talked about a supply and demand a little bit earlier. Do you see the demand for wrestling cards either kind of staying where it is, slowly going up, or do you think it will ever go back down to where it was before? I personally don't, but you've been in this longer than me, so I'd like to get your opinion.
Yeah, I think, it's left the barn and it's not going back to where it was before. And before, wrestling had a really bad stigma attached to it. And when I joined PSA and joined the boards, and if I shared a wrestling card, I either got crickets, nothing, or some of the responses that I'd get back is, why are you collecting this trading card of a guy in shorts or, bare chested men? Why is that something that you're collecting? And so it got no respect at all. And I think the fact today is that when people look at it as a viable trading card, then more and more people are jumping in. And of course, they're going to jump in at the high end guys first, the Hogans, The Rock, and Andre, etc. But now, and maybe even with something with the Young Rock series, you'll see more people, jumping into, maybe they'll jump into a Wild Samoans or Iron Cheek and stuff like that. But it's not going back. And of course, it could go down a little bit, but that bottom floor of what it used to be, it's never going back there again.
That opens up some more questions. It's a great conversation. So we see a market for a lot of these big name, high end guys: Hogan, Rock, Steve Austin, Triple H. You could just keep going. But then there are other like wrestling. You mentioned the Samoans, not near as popular to the mainstream. Do you see those cards kind of going up in value going forward, or they're going to just naturally? But do you think they're going to be a little bit more stagnant than that other really, I'll call it pop culture wrestling?
I think it's just going to be a gradual rise, for those guys. For example, I just saw Shane McMahon, SmackDown rookie, in a PSA 8.5 go for $200. And that never, ever would have happened before. Or you see Rocky Johnson, and of course, he's a main character on the show that just aired earlier this week, and that was that a $500 sale?
Something like it was around there, yeah.
Whereas Wrestling All Stars PSA 8. So, I definitely believe that there's room to grow, and even bringing some real wrestling fans into the hobby, because a lot of wrestling fans weren't card collectors, and so they're the ones that are going to gravitate to those type of characters and to build the market for those characters.
That's another good question. Why do you think wrestling fans aren't as into trading cards as they are, say, picking up T-shirts or action figures? It seems like sports fans are gravitated to trading cards, and if it's not trading cards, it's game-used memorabilia. I personally don't see as many wrestling fans doing that the same. What do you think that is?
It's hard for me to put a finger on it, to be honest. I know that there's a big market, for the Funko Pops, and before it was the signed 8x10s, and there's its own community as well. But I do believe that the market is expanding, or some of the people that really weren't into memorabilia at all, but were just wrestling fans growing up, and they're coming into cards. We've seen it expand. In the past, when I didn't win an auction, I could probably name who the person was that won it.
And it was so small.
That's not the case anymore. It'd be like, hey, David, you won that auction from me, or hey, Joey Graven, you got this, but, I don't recognize the feedback, score numbers on eBay, anymore. And that just tells me that the market's growing.
Speaking of the market growing, I meant to ask this earlier and I got sidetracked with other questions. Do you think wrestling could actually start appealing to even, we've already seen it. It's weird. We're just talking about wrestling fans not buying trading cards. I'm actually seeing more sports card guys getting into wrestling cards, but it seems like they're actually having fun getting into it. It's not like a monetary thing. Do you think wrestling could actually end up being a massive market because it has maybe a little bit more of a fan base worldwide, and whether you're male, female, old, young, as opposed to traditional sports? That's kind of a strange question, but
The key here is that I don't even think it needs a massive market. All it needs
okay.
is the market. And to me, the difference there is the market will be there, and the collectibles will rise just due to the fact that when they produce these wrestling cards, they didn't mass produce them. And now for cards that I used to think were massively produced, the 85 tops, the 1990 classic, or if you look at any of that product now, it's not there on eBay.
Right.
As far as unopened product, and of course there's some 85s, but it's pretty pricey. But if you want some 1995 WCW main event, it's not there. 1990 classic, I thought would never run out. About the only cards that are pretty plentiful are the 1991 Impel, and that's about it.
And even
You
those
know,
are starting, I could pick up boxes of those for, $10, and now they're 30, 40, 50. And I don't even, do you know of anything in there that's really worth chasing? There's like one Ric Flair card I really like where he's got his suit on and he's doing the 4. But other than that, I mean, there's not really much to chase in there. I guess people just want to try to, get those PSA 10s out of the packs.
yeah, and the thing is though, is once you slab something, I think you win. I felt
Oh,
like
yeah. Yeah.
I've won every time I've slabbed something. So in the past with those Impel boxes, as you say, you could buy the whole thing for $15. And if you're willing at the time to put in $7, $8 on it, maybe you make $20, and maybe you don't make $20, but let's just say you get $20 as the final result. You're still doubling your money,
Easy. Yeah.
and that's still winning. And I feel like all through the years of me slabbing things at PSA for the last 14 years, I've never took less than what I put into it.
Yeah, that's and I'm assuming you just keep rolling that snowball of money, just buying more stuff with what you sold, and just keep it going, keep slabbing stuff, and you're like, I like to say, if you're in football analogy, if you're moving the ball 5 yards every play, you can't lose.
Exactly. You don't have to be the Kansas City Chiefs and hit those home runs.
Yeah.
You can ground and pound.
Yep. All right. So last question. This is maybe a little bit of a lengthier question, but I really want to help some people with this. Everyone sees your collection, David's collection, other people's collections flashing these super high end, cards, that the Hogan 82s, the Ric Flair 82s, now the 85 Hogans, which were like $20 6 months ago. People see these big collections. Maybe they don't know where to start, or they don't have the funds to do it. Where would you suggest a collector just getting into wrestling cards, or somebody that is a diehard collector that all of a sudden wants these high-end pieces? What would be your advice on where to start and where to go from there?
Yeah, that is a good question. And it's something that I have seen asked before, where people feel like they've been priced out of certain markets, like the
Right.
Wrestling Hall is the main example. But to me, that there's still opportunities. If maybe you sit back and you find a 1985 Wrestling All Stars magazine, you're going to get 54 cards. And I would say that you really haven't seen the price jumps for a set like that. That's a good opportunity. And maybe it's not even a particular set, but looking at lots that are available on eBay. And I know that you've talked about this on, previous episodes that you've had, where you take what you want and then, utilize some of those extras to sell. And
Yeah, and
as
you
we
mentioned
just
doing
said,
that earlier yourself, buying those.
yeah,
Like,
get the ball rolling, making those small little gains. And I know that you said that you started very, small,
yep,
and
$10.
$10, and you've accumulated some pretty, impressive cards yourself. And so that it's still there. And one of the pieces of advice that you gave, and I think it was really sound, is if you could buy complete sets. Because
Yeah.
many times 1 or 2 cards, maybe you don't want the stars, or maybe you do, but maybe you take those 1 or 2 star cards, sell them, And then all of a sudden you have, 73 other cards that you could put into your collection and move forward from there. So, there's some strategies out there. And what I always say too is just collect what you love or what you believe in.
Yeah,
And one of the things
you're a prime example of that. Generally, I mean, you started collecting, and all of a sudden, the stuff that you love and want is now the top sought after stuff.
Yeah,
that's how it goes.
I even had someone contact me privately, and they were saying, "Hey, it doesn't seem like some of these folks think these 1997 paninis are going to be all that great." And I said, "Well, why are you concerned about asking other people? Do you like it or do you not?"
Yeah.
So, don't be concerned if so-and-so doesn't like it.
Right. I said last question. I got, I guess, one more. Talking about opportunities, what do you think of modern Topps product? I'm a big fan of the Chrome and Finest that WWE and Topps put out recently. Some of the other stuff was a little lackluster. Do you see some opportunities in there, and do you personally like any of it?
I'm not into modern, and I'll have to say that it's probably bitten me more than it's helped me. And maybe that's something that I need to develop as a collector as well, because I remember, first getting into the game and I saw the 85 Topps and I was like, oh, this is so abundant. Who really cares? I could pick this up anytime I want. And now today, that's high-end stuff, right?
Right.
And so that kind of bit me. And it's the same thing as as far as the 1998 comic images, of the cards with The Rock. Oh, that's just a little dollar card and I could get it anytime I want. And then all of a sudden, that's a pretty decent card in itself as well. So
right. Now, yeah.
I've actually been late to react. And if I was smart, I would probably collect more modern while it's, a lot cheaper. And I know that some of the modern product can be a little bit pricey for some, but aesthetically, it's a good-looking product, and Chrome seems to always be popular with collectors. So, again, if people enjoy it, I say go for it. It just hasn't been for me.
Do you think there's any part of the current product, as far as the actual in-ring and what's presented on television, that maybe is affecting your interest of the newer stuff also?
Yeah, I don't watch the newer product. I like more so the 80s characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little bit of a historian, so my collection goes back to 1887 and the Allen
Love that stuff.
And I worked all the way up from there and kind of learned about the history of the sport as I was collecting. And I just found that fascinating. But yeah, I would say after the Attitude Era, that it hasn't really been there for me. Although I do, appreciate the Kurt Angles, the Brock Lesnar's of the world, who comes from my background in wrestling.
Man, what a great conversation today, Rob. Thank you for all that information. I'm hoping that it will be able to help everybody that watches this. Before we go, let everybody know where they can find you, where they can check out all your collection.
Yeah, so I'm on eBay as Wrestling Card King. If you go to the PSA registry, all of my sets are Wrestling Card King. Also at Wrestling Card K1 on Twitter. And I'm also on Instagram, but it's more of a personal account. Every now and then I'll post a little bit of wrestling, but mostly on Twitter and on the PSA set registries where you can find me.
Guys, go check out his account. Make sure you can see all of these cards we've been talking about today. And like I said, learn something in the process. Rob, once again, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks everybody for watching. See you later. Wow, what a great chat that was. Lots of great information from a lot of different perspectives. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope the video brought you some value. If you like it, give me one of those. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure to share this video and all of my other content all over social platforms. Let's build this community. Let's have some fun. And until the next episode, keep collecting wrestling cards. I'll see you next time.